Okay, we're talking terrariums today. Hello. Yes, we are here. And we are going to get this right this time. So, when we're talking about terrariums for herbs, it's very specific. Obviously, terrariums are more traditionally known to be used with succulents and carnivorous plants. Even some orchids love terrariums. Back in the old days, in order to transport them, they would do it in a terrarium in order to get them placed. You can do ferns, you can do mosses. There's a whole variety of things you can do in terrariums. But there are particular varietals of herbs that are great for terrariums. And most specifically, it's these guys. We've got the what are called the Mediterranean herbs. So a lot of these are the perennial herbs that you can grow from year to year. So looking on the screen here, we've got the mint, we've got the thyme, lavender, rosemary, sage, and basil are some of the major ones you can do. And most of these are Mediterranean herbs that originate from the Mediterranean Sea area. And some of these are definitely better than others when it comes to doing them in a terrarium. And I would say you want to be very careful if you're trying to do, say, a thyme, or even oregano can be done in that as well. Oregano can be done. But whenever you're doing those ones, especially thyme, oregano, and even say the rosemary and the sage even, I think, doing them in the terrarium can be very sensitive because the idea is to keep a little extra moisture in there, but you don't want to get it too moist because those guys in particular, if you keep the soil too moist, it's definitely going to get some root rot and cause some trouble. So you want to be careful with how you do it. And we'll talk about those specifics a little bit more as we go on here as to just how you do the watering with the terrarium in particular. But first off, we're going to get started very soon. I got my pot right here. Now, I'm going to show you just a cool makeshift way to do this with a pot. The reason I would say do it in a pot rather than saying something like this, which just if you do it in a glass container, you fill it with some soil, maybe cap it with some cling film. This will be as pretty and everything, and you can definitely do that. But if you're trying to grow the herbs big, the whole idea of a terrarium is mainly as a starter, right? So you want to get them going, you want to get them moving, and then transfer them into another pot. So good to see GLG here. Thank you. You joined at the right time, because if you joined earlier, you would not have heard me. You'd just see me doing this. And that would not have been good. So yeah, but if you're doing them, I say always stick with doing them in a pot, so you can then transfer it into a bigger one. The problem with doing them in something like a glass container, you could just essentially put a glass container over a pot. But if you're going to do that, you're going to have a big enough glass container. This is the smallest one I have, and this big guy here doesn't even fit over it. So, yeah. You definitely want to have one that's a wider mouth that's going to be able to fit that. I think, while this is tall, it definitely doesn't have a very wide circumference. So you're going to have something that has a pretty good sized diameter to be able to go over the bowl wide enough and also not touch the herbs as they start growing. So that's my point of doing it this way. So let's get started. So basically what I do is you can do this with, say, 3 or 4 sticks on just nice little sticks here. They're, about the length of my forearm there. And what I'll do, just sneak this down here down to this and see if you can see this at all. You can see my microphone is what you can see. Just move this over here and hopefully we can start seeing this. There we go. All right. So, yeah. Bring my table over here so you can see it better. Yeah, Eric's doing really good today. Here we go. So, very simply, you just put these 4 spikes in here. Generally, before I do this, I've already put the seeds in here, and I would have maybe even already watered it. But I haven't done the water yet. What you want to do on the very first watering is be very thorough. Give it a real heavy watering the very first time, okay? See how much I'm putting in there? It's quite a bit. You're really soaking that soil and getting it nice and thick. You should have some water actually popping out at the bottom there, which I do. You see that water coming out? Yeah, you should be able to have a little bit of water actually coming all the way through. In fact, I'm going to give it just a little bit more. You're really saturating it because after this, we're not going to actually be adding any more water for a while. Generally, if I do a terrarium like this, I may not add any water for a week. Some people, if they do an open terrarium, you could then say maybe do a little water, just a spritz or two every day just from a spray bottle and do it that way. So, all right, so we've got that on there. Now we need to rediscover our cling film. And I do this without tape or anything. I kind of just do a loose wrap method. I'm sure if we can get the cling film actually out of here. Well, this is exactly what I did with my one herb, which I was dorky and I did not bring upstairs. It's looking really good. If you guys want, I can like take a minute to go run and grab it, but you know, most people aren't going to have that kind of patience. So here we go. You want to make sure it's long enough to go over the whole thing. So you see how long that is? It's nice and long, about the full length of my body here. In fact, you can always go a little bit longer if you aren't sure. So I cut that off and basically just make sure it's all the way over. Like I said, this is just the quick and dirty method. You can do the real pretty glass terrariums if you want. But this is like, hey, if you don't want to invest in that, you can just do this. Then you just wrap it around. You cinch up the ends. And voila. That's a basic terrarium right there. Ta-da! Just like that. It's just that easy. Boom, boom, we're done. Except for the fact that what you want to do also is probably put a rubber band around this middle section here. Okay? That'll help keep this in place. And then, of course, all this extra water that's now come out here, we're going to dump that and get rid of it. We don't want it just sitting in the water. That's just going to cause problems, right? Let's come back up here again. Okay. Wah! Woo! Hooray! We got that working. This is how tenuous my setup is. Everything just starts falling. Hooray! Okay. Ta-da! Eric is back. Woo! Doing terrariums live is intense stuff. I should have probably thought this out a bit better about my setup for moving around. But hey, that's part of the fun of live streaming, isn't it? Well, there we go. So, if you have any questions, let me know. This I did, like I said, for one of my Thai basils already. I just did some lavender in here. That's what's in here right now. Because I've had trouble growing lavender from seed before, and I wanted to really see, okay, will this help it by getting it that extra moisture to help it grow initially? And I've noticed so far with the English weather being so crazy, lavender grows really good around here, but trying to grow it in a pot, I've had, for whatever reason, a little bit more trouble doing it that way. So, yeah, I mean, I figured, yeah, let's give this sucker a shot and try doing a terrarium with some lavender. But if this does well, like my other herbs have done well in their terrariums, particularly my basils, I'm definitely going to probably start doing more of this consistently because herbs love a good amount of moisture. And the hardest balance, I think, to get with herbs when you're first starting them off is to be able to keep the right amount of moisture in there. I mean, yes, you can get a moisture meter and check them every day that way, or you can do the whole finger method. But it can be very tenuous, and this is a good way to keep a certain level of moisture in there each and every day. So I really like it. If you haven't tried it before and you want to grow some herbs, I think it's a good way to go about starting them off. But thanks, GLG. Thanks for the I appreciate it. Yeah, it was a tough demo to start, but we got it in the end. Wow, that was surprisingly tense. I'm feeling like a little bit like, whoo, that was crazy. Hopefully in the replay it won't lose translation, but I actually got some dirt on my keyboard there too. I'm not sure what else to say about terrariums if you guys don't have any questions about them. Like I said, that was the whole point of today, was to talk about terrariums with the herbs. Another one you can do this way is chamomile. I've heard that's really good with doing terrariums as well. But you know, really, yeah, if you're wanting to grow any one of these herbs here in particular, they can all grow well in a terrarium. Especially, I think, more important than anything is trying to grow those really hard to grow herbs. And mint is probably one of the easiest herbs to grow, but from seed, it isn't necessarily as easy as people would think. I think it's actually, once it gets started and gets moving, mint can go crazy. It can just take over an entire yard if you don't control it and keep it in a contained area. But getting it started, it can actually be a little bit difficult sometimes. So starting off with a terrarium, even with the mint, I don't think is a bad thing. So, but the ones in particular I've found very helpful with the basil are off varietals of your standard Ocimum basilicum. So not your standard sweet basil, if doing it with all the other different types of basil. So Tulsi basil, Thai basil, cinnamon basil I think would benefit from it as well. But I've not actually tried it with the standard sweet basil, which it probably will work with that as well. I wouldn't be surprised if it did. But I haven't had much trouble growing a sweet basil without a terrarium, so I haven't felt the need to do it yet, you know? Okay. So Little Farmer's Farm says a nice Tesco cut flower bucket could work really well when it comes to doing a little terrarium. So, yeah, there's a good thought. But yeah, like I said, any basic container, it doesn't even have to be a glass one, something that's just clear that can allow the moisture in still. The only, you know, if you're doing a glass container, if it's really thick like this, it can still let lots of light in. The only trouble is you don't want to necessarily create a refraction where it contains too much heat, and then all of a sudden you're killing the herbs because of the heat, right? So that's the only thing to be careful about if you're going to try and do it in a glass container, is the amount of heat that can be contained. That's why I like actually just doing the plastic wrap method, is it doesn't necessarily keep extra heat in there. Unless you're in a zone that needs that, okay? If you're in a zone that you have trouble keeping it, it's kind of like creating a little mini greenhouse. And yeah, if you need all that extra heat, then boom, there it is, you know. Put it in a thicker glass container and, you know, get the job done. So, yeah, that's a good way to go it, yeah. So the Geeky Garden says the basic thought other than looks is to raise the humidity level for the herbs. That's correct. Yeah, that is the basic idea, is you're keeping a certain amount of moisture in there at all times, and of course raising the humidity level. And then by doing so, you are allowing you're preventing it from really drying out. And when you're first starting off, a lot of herbs, they like having a good amount of moisture in that soil, but not having the soil saturated, so you end up getting root rot, or it prevents the herbs from even starting because it's overloaded with the water. And that's the hardest thing with getting the start going, is that it's very easy to go over that balance. And I think a lot of people tend to err on the side of watering rather than underwatering, right? So you want to be very careful about that. And the terrarium can help with that, because once you put it in the terrarium, you water it much less than you would without one. Okay, so I generally, once I put it in a terrarium, I won't water it, excuse me, for like at least another 5 to 7 days after I put it in there, because all the water I loaded this thing up with in the first place should then actually just be working in there in that humidity to help keep it working. Yeah. Uh-oh. Volume's too low? Am I too low on the volume? Uh-oh. I didn't think I was going that low, but apparently I need to mark it up a little bit. Okay. Maybe it's because I'm a little further away than normal on my mic here. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. I always try and keep it going outside of the area there, but now all of a sudden I'm going to be louder. So if you started from the beginning, hello, I'm louder. Geeky Garden says he keeps a 10-gallon aquarium in his lab that he puts over many plant cuttings to keep the humidity up. So yeah, essentially you're doing just a large-scale terrarium. I mean, when it comes down to it, this is kind of like creating a mini greenhouse, you know? And like I said, if you have one you have some herbs that need that kind of greenhouse setting, which that can include cilantro, coriander. That can be one that definitely likes a little bit extra, to be a little bit warmer. Not tons warmer, but these Mediterranean herbs can be that same way because coming from the Mediterranean, they're used to those warmer temperatures. So they definitely can handle being in a much hotter environment. So you probably could just do it in a greenhouse but if you don't have a greenhouse, hey, that's what I said. That's the whole point of this, is if you don't have a greenhouse, boom, this is the way you can go about it, doing it. Oh, well, there you go. Boom, boom, boom. Terrariums done. I'm trying to think of anything I've missed about this. And if you guys don't have any questions, I'm going to hop off. Hey, I've got lots more salt videos coming out. This next week, I believe I have the history of salt in, where am I at now? Europe? I'm in Europe now, aren't I? The history of salt in Europe should be coming out next week, followed by another live stream, and then the history of salt in France in particular. If I'm doing that right, yeah. I believe it's overall Europe and then France in particular, because France had some very peculiar salt laws. But yeah, thanks so much for joining me on this terrarium adventure in technical failure today. That was definitely the most slapdash live stream I've ever done as far as items dropping and flopping all over the place. So sorry about all the technical flaws. I'm glad you all stuck with me through it. You guys have a great day. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good one. We'll see you next round. Bye.